I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, Brunning, Bruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It is Monday and we are back. We're going to be doing a couple of days in a row this week talking about running backs, but we also have plenty to talk about from the weekend that was. Dennis, I had suggested maybe we could talk about three players that caught our eye in preseason. Mine, you hardly ever talk about kickers, but when a kicker nails a 70-yard field goal, even in the preseason, would have been an NFL record, and that was Cam Little of the Jaguars. That caught my eye. I thought that was pretty good. Enjoyed watching Shedeur Sanders. We wondered how he was going to do when we chatted about it last time. 14 of 23, 138 yards, 2 touchdowns. Still listed as QB4 on the depth chart, much to the consternation of Skip Bayless and everyone else that has been pulling for him or over-rooting for him. And then my other one was Jackson Dart, 12 of 19, 154 yards, had a beautiful touchdown to Lil Jordan Humphrey. I thought both those guys looked like what you would like to see for preseason guys playing against backups out there, competent. Unlike some of the quarterbacks we saw, they looked pretty competent. They looked pretty good. I still don't think either of them is going to start in week one, but I was feeling better about shares that I have of them and the potential. I'm not a big Shedeur Sanders person, so I wasn't sure how he was going to do, but I was actually pleasantly surprised. I'm sure as a Browns fan, you were pleasantly surprised as well, but who stood out to you?
Well, with Shedeur, he has a Tom Brady sized chip on his shoulder that could very well work in his favor. And as long as, in my opinion, as long as they don't rush him, he could end up being the answer. He's got to learn how to play in the NFL. Going against, backups and vanilla defenses is great, but you can only do what you're asked. And he was asked to do some things, and he looked pretty competent in doing it. I haven't watched the film other than watching the actual game, but I'm not a guy that has the knowledge to necessarily break it all down in depth from, say, a scouting or an O-line grading, QB grading perspective. But I think him and Jackson Dart both look very, very promising. So I think both of them are in situations with head coaches that have warm seats underneath them. But if they show growth and the teams play reasonably well, if the Giants don't have to put Jackson Dart in on week 2, and you'd like to think with Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston there, or even Tommy DeVito, they don't have to rush him. In Cleveland, they have every other quarterback in the U.S., so there isn't necessarily a reason for them to force Shedeur Sanders if he's not ready. My three guys, I liked what I saw from TreVeyon Henderson, and I'm not talking about the kickoff return. Yes, that was great. Take it from us Ohio State guys. We'll tell you, he is fast. He's very, very fast. He's got good size, about 208 pounds. 5'10", 5'11". But he only had one carry, took it for 18 yards. Caught all 3 passes thrown at him. Didn't gain a ton of yards. I think he only had like 9 yards or 12 yards.
12 yards.
So, but he caught him. He did what he was supposed to in the plays where the ball wasn't going to him. He's a guy you can count on to execute what his responsibilities are. I'm going to go on a tangent here because today was Cole's first day back at practice after the scrimmage Saturday. And so over the last couple of days, we've talked a little bit about how he felt things went. On defense, Cole is a nose tackle. He recognizes his job isn't glorious. And he's like, we were watching film today, and there were some plays where I had 3/5 of the defense or 3/5 of the offensive line focused on me. He's like, the coaches said, I did my job. No, I wasn't making plays, or making tackles. I wasn't deep into the backfield, but the other team respected him enough that they were putting 2 and 3 guys on him. That is what TreVeyon Henderson did when he didn't have the ball. I think it's going to be a pretty even split between Ramondre Stevenson and TreVeyon Henderson. We've seen the model. It's Detroit. You've got Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. That's what the model is. I think that's going to happen in New England, at least until TreVeyon or Ramondre moves on. And I think that works best for TreVeyon Henderson because in college, we have seen him pick up soft tissue injuries, not be able to produce consistently because of them. But he's a super explosive back. I loved what I saw outside of the kickoff return. But the kickoff return sure, was a bolt of lightning. Another guy that, I'm in one Devy league. And when I took over the team, this guy was on the taxi squad while he was still in college. And I ended up cutting him because he had a great early college career, he never really grew to the next level, and that was Will Shipley. So eventually I cut Will Shipley off my Devy team. But I think Shipley is a good pass receiver, another guy that's about 205, 210 pounds, quick, does the things that he needs to do to be a viable player. Is he going to carry Saquon Barkley's volume if Barkley gets injured? No, we're going to see a committee backfield back there, but I think Shipley will lead the charge. So I do like what Shipley showed us this week. And my last guy is another Eagle. I think Tanner McKee might be the best backup quarterback that hasn't had an opportunity to be a starter in the NFL. He looks like he's a different type of quarterback from Jalen Hurts, but he looks like he knows what he's doing. Good passer. When they put him in, he executes the offense like they need to do with him. Good thrower, moves okay in the pocket, not going to run away from people. But I really, it's hard because you watch and you're like, if the Eagles are smart, they're going to move McKee because we saw the Patriots do it for years. They semi-develop a quarterback, move him for a second-round draft pick. Well, I think also Howie Roseman's like, no, we're going to develop depth and keep it for as long as we can afford it. So I don't think McKee will be on the move anytime soon, but I did like what I've seen from him.
No, I agree. Every team needs a good backup quarterback. That's why I was kind of laughing. Jarrett Stidham had a nice game for Denver, and they were like, well, teams are interested. Maybe the Broncos can move him for a pick. And I'm like, and then do what behind him? Because if you're telling me we're rolling with, one unfortunate circumstance away from it being the Sam Ehlinger-led Broncos, I'm not okay with that. And for the Eagles, I think part of the reason they moved Kenny Pickett, who is probably a more expensive and bigger name, is because of what they liked about Tanner McKee, because Dorian Thompson-Robinson was okay, but he has not looked great when he's gotten chances, and Kyle McCord probably needs some time to sit back there and develop. So if I'm the Eagles and I think I'm a Super Bowl contender, I don't want to have a gaping hole at backup quarterback.
I agree. And, I like Kyle McCord. I think he's similar in what he does to Tanner McKee. So if for some ungodly reason they have to move on from Jalen Hurts, I think they have now they've got two similar quarterbacks. I don't think there's any reason they will. I think this team is run very well. But, if McCord ends up, starting to produce as well as McKee, then I think you may see them move McKee because they're like, well, we've got McCord. I don't know how many other MAC quarterbacks there are in the NFL, but
going to keep them going. Okay. We did have a group of injuries. I'm going to tick off kind of the notable injuries from week 1, and then you can tell me if any of them concern you. Rondale Moore, first play after being out all of 2024. He had injured his right knee last year, this time an injury to his left knee. They believe his season will be over. That's 2 years in a row. I'm starting to think his career is kind of teetering on the brink. It was a day that ended in DAY, so Tyjae Spears was injured. He got carted off. They're saying it's a sprained ankle. He's out for the rest of the preseason. There is some hope that he could be back week 1, but that is far from a certainty. Jaden Reed for the Packers was in a walking boot. His coach said simultaneously that they thought he would be back for week 1, but that it was concerning. So that's great. Alexander Madison injured his neck. He's had surgery. He is out for the year. That leaves Ollie Gordon, who looks pretty good, and Jalen Wright in Miami behind Devon Achane. And then Landon Dickerson got injured in practice yesterday. There was a lot of trepidation at first. Today it came back as a meniscus tear. On my way home, they were talking about how it is expected to be a minor procedure. They are hopeful that he will be able to be back for that Thursday night opener in week 1. I think Dickerson concerning because he's a big-time offensive line piece for a team that likes to run the ball. Among the position players, it makes me nervous about Jaden Reed. I was kind of skeptical about Tyjae Spears to begin with. I don't think Madison or Moore was probably a guy that people were counting on this year.
Yeah, I don't even know which team. Is Rondale, he in Minnesota?
He went to Minnesota. Yeah, he had a 1-year contract with Atlanta, never played for them because he blew out his right knee in training camp last year. Signed a 1-year deal with Minnesota and appears to have blown out his left knee this year.
Yeah, I feel bad for the injuries. He was a great receiver at Purdue in the Big Ten, lit up Ohio State 1 year. He's never been, I felt like he was overdrafted by Arizona. He just wasn't a guy that I felt like would be consistently fantasy relevant. The fact that he's still in the league, 5 seasons later, I think is a win for him. It's unfortunate that he's blown out his knee again. I agree with you. I'm not sure that, he's going to have another opportunity to be a contributor. Tyjae Spears is, it's his ankle. He came into the league with pretty degenerative cartilage in his knee or knees. And that's always been the fears that he was going to basically be a one contract running back because of those knee issues. And he just can't seem to catch a break and put it together. He'll look good when he plays, but you give him a couple, 3 games, and next thing you know, he's injured again. Now he's got that ankle injury. They being the Titans, feel ripe as a team that's going to sign somebody. They've got Khalil Mullings, who's, a bruiser in the form of Hassan Haskins and Julius Chestnut on the depth chart, and not a whole heck of a lot after that. So it feels very much like they're going to bring in another running back to add depth to this team, because I don't think they want to give Tony Pollard, an 80% touch share.
I think it kind of depends, I guess, on how Tyjae Spears progresses, to me, I wonder, if I thought the same thing, that they were probably going to have to sign somebody, but if they think he's going to be back for week 1, they may just roll with it.
Well, and two, from a contract perspective, if they wait until after week 1 to sign them, then the contract isn't guaranteed for the year. So if they sign somebody in week 2 and cut them in week 8, they're not on the hook for the rest of the season, versus if they sign them for preseason and they're on the roster week 1, if they cut them in week 8, they're still on the hook for the rest of the contract for the year. Jayden Reed, he's another guy that can't seem to catch a break. They brought in their first round wide receiver to Green Bay in 20-ish years. They've moved Bo Melton over to cornerback. Christian Watson it seemed like he was primed to be the top 3. Him, Golden, and Romeo Doubs, holding down the fort till Watson and Watson gets healthy and Dontavian Wicks learns how to catch. We'll see if he can get back and stay healthy. You're never, you can't get too comfortable. Like if I'm drafting today, I'm probably holding off a little bit, pushing him down my board some, because he does seem to show a pattern of being dinged up. I don't think Alexander Madison was going to be fantasy relevant. So I'm not.
Yeah, I liked what we saw from Ollie Gordon. Tyreek Hill really likes Jalen Wright, apparently.
Yeah. Well, I like Jalen Wright too. I think Jalen Wright is kind of a cross between Ollie Gordon and Devon Achane. He's bigger. He's a 200+ pound back. But he's fast. He ran a 4.3 and change at the combine. So, it's one of those situations where if Achane gets banged up, I think we see Jalen Wright be the lead back, but I think Ollie Gordon will get some significant playing time. I don't know who else they have on their depth chart real quick. Let me look. Nobody.
Yeah, I think it's
the fullback.
I think it's really those 2 young guys, but that's not a bad place to be.
No,
so
not at all.
Okay, well, we are speaking of running backs, going to be looking at running back rankings for redraft the next 2 days. Today we're going to do 50 to 26. Tomorrow will be the top 25, just doing the first 2 days of the week this week, so that Dennis has a burgeoning sports star of his own in his household that has many sporting commitments, and we want to make sure we're making space for that. There are stage moms and there are field dads, and Dennis has become a full-time field dad.
I'm living my best life, man.
I'm excited for him. I'm excited for you. It'll be fun to go out there.
Between Caleb with his music and Cole with his sports, and my wife with her camper, like, man, I'm winning on all 3 fronts.
So Dennis, why don't you kick us off? I did put color bars in there to help. Why don't you go 50 to 39?
All right. So I'm going to start off. I kind of went through and tried to look and make sure I didn't get too deep, putting in some RB3s over RB2s, though there are a couple that I maybe one, I think one team I got 3 running backs in. But at 50, I got Trey Benson, the aforementioned Miami running back. If Devon Achane is healthy, I think Benson, and it feels like Benson at like 25% of the snaps and Gordon at 10 to 15. So I think they're going to use Achane at a pretty heavy clip. unless he gets hurt, and then it's going to be a boost for Benson and Gordon.
Benson's on the Cardinals, so he's behind
Damn,
James
I
Conner.
keep mixing up him and Jalen Wright, who I have up here higher, I think. All right, let me rephrase that. You're going to edit this out, right?
There you go.
Jalen Wright has established himself pretty good as the number 2 back in Arizona, or Trey Benson, excuse me. However, James Conner has a stranglehold on that job. And while even Conner has come out and talked about, hey, we need to make sure we're getting this guy his touches, Conner is just such a good all-around back that it's hard to do. And then when you got a quarterback that, ends drives because he's not throwing the ball enough to convert first downs, it kind of takes out some of the opportunities. At 49 and 48, I got Quinshon Judkins and Jerome Ford. I really struggled a little bit with how I was going to represent this Cleveland backfield. I like Judkins' talent. I like Jerome Ford as a complementary piece, but we don't know what's happening with Judkins. He hasn't signed. I feel like him saying I'm waiving my right to a speedy trial is basically saying we're going to push it off till next year while all the stuff gets worked out. And then he's going to try to get Cleveland to agree to the contract so he can play.
Well, the best legal experts in sports said that if he signs before charges are filed, they're going to put him on the commissioner's exempt list that the NFL has already told Cleveland.
I get it. But it's like, so what they're saying is, hey, we're going to punish you for this thing that you haven't been charged with. And it's, to me, that seems.
Well, the exempt list, you still get your paycheck. You're just not allowed to play, which I think if they knew that is a reason why Cleveland's not in a hurry to sign him, because they don't want to pay somebody they don't know if they can play, and they can hold his rights for a year. They don't have to sign him until next offseason.
I get it. I do get that. I just feel like the procedural move of waiving the trial was from his camp's view saying, hey, you guys wait a year and a half for Rashee Rice. You wait a year and a half for Jordan Addison. They were both charged and convicted. I haven't even been charged yet, so I don't know. It'll be interesting to watch. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying I felt like I had to include him because if he plays, I think he's the number 1 back there, and Ford is the number 2. If Ford is the number 1 back, I think we'll see a lot more of the other running backs. If Judkins is there, I think it's going to be pretty much Judkins and Ford carrying the load. 47, I got Austin Eckler. He looks spent. We hear him talking about how slow Nick Chubb looks in Houston. And I'm thinking to myself, man, he can't look slower than Austin Eckler looked last year. So I still think Eckler has a role, but I just don't know how fantasy relevant it's going to be. And a low-end RB4 felt about as good as I could go. Rachaad White at 46, he's still the number 2. I'm a big Sean Tucker fan, and Bucky Irving grabbed a hold of that job and basically put Rachaad White on the sideline. New offensive coordinator again in Tampa, but I do have Rachaad White, who's a really, really good pass catching back, just doesn't have any vision, so he isn't a very good runner of the football. Number 45, I really wrestled with where to put Devin Singletary because most people are just completely writing him off. I think Cam Skattebo has potential, though he was kind of slow. He didn't run. He's a good pass catcher. I just feel like Devin Singletary is still going to be a viable back in that field, in that backfield. I like Tyrone Tracy. I think he's going to be the RB1 there this year. But it's going to be it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out. Some of it, I think, is almost loyalty on Brian Daboll's part. Hey, we worked so hard to get this guy. This was our target. Yeah, Tracy outplayed him, but, let's not, put him out to pasture just yet. 44, I got Tyjae Spears. I like Spears, but he's starting to fade and become irrelevant, not only in redraft, but in Dynasty, just because he seems to always be picking up a nick here or there. 43, I got Cam Skattebo. I'm not sure how him and Singletary are going to shake out. I almost feel like I should have either moved Singletary up one or Skattebo down one so that I had them back to back like I did the Cleveland backs, because you're kind of taking a shot that one of them is going to make the other one irrelevant, and I'm just not sure which one it's going to be. I'm leaning Singletary right now, even though I have Skattebo higher, because I feel like Skattebo, he's got potential. And so I put him higher based on potential, even though he's banged up right now. But that injury could open the door for Devin Singletary to become the change of pace back and hold on to that role. Number 42, I got Rico Dowdle. I think he's going to be the clear number 2 in Carolina, but I do think that is Chuba Hubbard's backfield. 41, I got Tyler Algier. It's tough to figure out where to put him. He's pretty close to where he was last year. I think he was a few spots higher last year, but Bijan, I also have a few spots higher than he finished last year, so I moved Algier down kind of in a corresponding move to Bijan going higher. Number 40, I got Braylon Allen. I think there's a chance Allen gets more work than expected, but I really like Breece Hall's skill set. I think he's finally healthy after having an injury 2 years ago. But Braylon Allen may end up being the goal line back. He might be the David Montgomery guy, just with a 4.4 speed. It's interesting to kind of figure out how am I going to go, because their other back was Isaiah Davis, their third back. When he had to play last year, he looked great too. But I feel like this is going to be a Breece Hall season with Braylon Allen backing him up.
And then one more.
39, I got Zach Charbonnet. I like Charbonnet. I just think Kenneth Walker fits that offense so much better. Unfortunately, Kenneth Walker has picked up an injury, as he is wont to do. So, in my opinion, Seattle, with these two backs, they're not going to change what they do. So if Walker doesn't play for 6 games, Charbonnet just steps into the lead back role, and they keep running the same offense, albeit, in my opinion, not quite as efficiently, because Charbonnet isn't quite as good as Kenneth Walker. But I think Walker will play most of the season. Charbonnet will be the backup.
All right, so for me at 50, I still have old guy Kareem Hunt. I think he fills a specific role with the Chiefs. I was excited when they signed Elijah Mitchell, but everything I've seen, I get less and less excited by the day. I think it's going to end up being old guy Kareem Hunt, who they brought back platooning with Isaiah Pacheco. Then I have Braylon Allen at 49. Could he outpace that? Certainly could, but it's hard to tell what the Jets want to do. And I also think, based even after what we saw in the preseason, a lot of their offense is going to be Justin Fields running. He looked pretty good doing it in that first preseason game as well. I have Isaac Rendo at 48, another guy that could go higher depending on what happens with Christian McCaffrey, but I think they feel locked in with him as number 2. He and Christian McCaffrey were actually held out of the preseason game because they're the top runners. I have Tyler Algier at 47, probably one of the best number 2 running backs in the league. If he wasn't behind Bijan Robinson and a team that likes to pass, I think he could be higher. So we'll see if he ends up getting to go somewhere this offseason. I have Ray Davis at 46. I love what we saw from him last year. I think he's a good number 2 back in Buffalo. Rashad White at 45, the number 2 option for the Buccaneers. I think he and Bucky Irving are kind of their 2 guys there. I have Nick Chubb at 44. It's been mixed reports. Some have said he looks slow. Some have said he looks pretty good. I think there's going to be some opportunity for him and maybe some other backs because it still seems like Mixon is not healthy, and there's a lot of concern about him missing time in the regular season. So I think at least at the beginning of the year, it is going to be some other guys in there. Some positive reports on Trey Benson. I have him at 43 right now. Could this be the year that he breaks out higher? It could be, but we've seen James Conner do pretty well there. Hard to count James Conner out just yet. I have Austin Eckler at 42. I agree with you. He doesn't look very great as a runner, but caught a lot of passes last year and did enough to be fantasy relevant in that territory. I think he's going to split again with Brian Robinson Jr. I don't really think anything in the Commanders' backfield is better than any running back 3. I have Jordan Mason at 41. I think he's going to start mixing in with Aaron Jones, but Jones looked great last year and still looks pretty good there. I have Cam Scatterbo at 40. I don't have Devin Singletary up this high, and I have Scatterbo and Tyrone Tracy much closer together. Tracy will be in this chunk of running backs we look at today. I also don't think the Giants are going to be very good, so that's part of why I'm not incredibly high on them. And then I have Jaylen Warren at 39. He was about this range last year. And I don't think, a lot has significantly changed in that offense. I don't think he's going to take a much bigger role. I think Caleb Johnson's going to kind of slide into that Najee Harris role, and Jaylen Warren's going to be what he is. They have a lot of tight ends that they're working in now too. They got Darnell Washington going in the preseason game. We know they traded for Johnny Smith. They still have Pat Freiermuth. I wonder how much that impacts, passes to running backs. I felt more comfortable with him in this range. Why don't you give us your 38 to 26? So these are roughly kind of running back 3 guys.
All right, so I've got Javonte Williams at 38. I mean, mostly because somebody's got to run the ball in Dallas, and we saw Rico Dowdle have a decent year last year. I'm not sold that it's going to be the Jaden Blue show. I think Blue will get an opportunity and maybe he runs away with it, but I just feel like Javonte Williams will be the lead back there. But I don't have either of them really high up in my rankings. 37, I got J.K. Dobbins. I like Dobbins' ability coming out of college. I just feel that him and Tyrone Tracy are going to split that backfield, or not Tyrone Tracy, R.J. Harvey are going to split that backfield. I don't know if it'll be totally even. Peyton drafted Harvey, so obviously he's going to want to see him be successful. I do have Harvey higher, but I think Dobbins, if he's healthy, is going to have a fairly significant role in the backfield. 36, I got Jordan Mason. I agree with you. I think he's going to split time as long as he's healthy with Aaron Jones. I think I have him probably with a little bigger share of that backfield than you do. 35, I got Tank Bigsby. Here's another situation where I've got the 2 backs in that backfield pretty close together. I think Bigsby has established himself as the goal line back and the early down back. He's going to probably get the most carries rush for the most yards, rush for the most touchdowns, but he isn't going to get very much volume in the passing game. So there won't be a lot of receptions there. And he'll come off the field. Basil Tootin will push him for carries. And if Tootin's speed shows like it did in the last game, that could be problematic. Somebody's got to take control of this backfield. Right now, I think a lot of people wrote Travis Etienne off maybe a little too soon, but I think it's going to be a pretty even split fantasy production-wise between Etienne and Bigsby, with Tootin following them up, pushing to take a role there. 34, I got Ramondre Stevenson. He's another guy that I think people want to write off because of how Travion Henderson looks. I think Ramondre is going to be the David Montgomery to Henderson's Jahmyr Gibbs. So I think they're both going to have a lot of production in New England, just not quite what Detroit gets out of theirs. And that's why I've got both of the New England backs a little bit lower. 33, I got Travis Etienne, like I mentioned, with Bigsby at 35. I think they split fairly evenly. 32, Brian Robinson Jr. This is a case where somebody's going to be the lead back there. Chris Rodriguez isn't the answer. We saw Austin Eckler not look great. Eckler will do some passing down work. A lot of people are counting on Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt to step up and kind of take this role. I think he's going to have to earn it when you've got an old school coach like Dan Quinn. I don't think you end up as a rookie just kind of strolling in and taking over a spot unless you're elite a la Jaden Daniels. 31, I got Ray Davis. I have him and James Cook a little closer together than most people. I think Davis has shown that he can gain the tough yards. I expect James Cook's numbers to come down from a fantasy perspective because I don't expect him to score 18 touchdowns. And that's if he ever gets to camp. They like Ray Davis. They like Ty Johnson. If all things are equal to what they were last year, I think Cook's touchdowns go down and Davis's touchdowns go up. And that's really where I have the split. Number 30, I got Jaylen Warren. And 29, I got Caleb Johnson. Again, two guys that are splitting the backfield that'll have fairly clearly defined roles that I think will be pretty close together in fantasy production. And so that's why I have them together there. 28, Tyrone Tracy. I guess I'm pounding the table that it's going to be Tracy's backfield. I like Tyrone Tracy. From a passing game perspective, he brings that wide receiver fluidity to it. He's got good size. I just think he's still going to be the guy there, the number one. But I think it's a backfield where you're gonna, whenever you have to start one of the guys in this backfield, in this Giants backfield this week, you're going to be sweating that position. 27, I got Tony Pollard. He could produce higher, especially if Tyjae Spears, his injury lingers and that hampers his productivity. Tony Pollard's just been unspectacularly consistent. And so he's just kind of going out there, keeping his nose clean, doing what he needs to do. He's going to be the starting back. His volume, I think, is going to be dependent upon how well Cam Ward does. If Ward settles in and is executing the passing game nicely, I think that opens up opportunities for Tony Pollard to run the ball more efficiently, get better yardage. If Cam Ward struggles and they can't throw the ball, they stack the box, it's going to make it harder for Tony Pollard. Pollard is a good pass-catching back as well. He doesn't have the explosiveness that Tyjae Spears has shown, but I do like Tony Pollard. And then at 26, I got Joe Mixon. You know, he's dealing with a foot injury and he's almost 30 years old. And it's one of those things. I'm not concerned about any of the backs behind him taking his job. I just think that the touches have added up. And now that he's dealing with a foot injury, I just have concerns about his ability to be as productive as he historically has been. If I'm in the Mixon business, I'm trying to get out of it, especially in Dynasty.
Yep. So for me at 38, I have J.K. Dobbins. Not much different than you. Based on what I saw, Broncos played their starters in the first preseason game. R.J. Harvey was out there a lot, taking a lot of the carries, but Dobbins came in whenever it was a passing situation or when it was in kind of 2-minute situation. I think for sure that's where he's going to be in there because he's a veteran. He can block. He understands things a little bit better. I have Najee Harris at 37. I think Harris is still going to have a significant role for the Chargers. I think they signed him. I don't have him as the highest back there, but I think that's a team that likes to run. I have Tyrone Tracy at 36. I do think he'll be the better of the Giants running backs. I just don't think either of them is going to be particularly high or that far apart. I have Zach Charbonnet at 35. I like him a lot, and I think he's going to continue to produce. So I have him in there. Take Bigsby at 34. Bigsby stepped up a lot last year and looked pretty good running the ball for the Jaguars. I think he looked like the better runner. Might be the role that he carves out again this year. I have Ramondre Stevenson at 33. So this is the second team in a row where, I have the Jaguars 2 backs bunched closely in this range. I have the Patriots 2 backs, top 2 backs kind of bunched closely because I think they're going to split some work. I have Joe Mixon at 32. The injury is concerning. He's still not back practicing. He started out on the NFL non-football injury list. Ankle injury, those kind of things can linger and persist. I think he's going to be hampered as he starts the season. Will he miss some more time? So I just have him taking a little bit of a fade back. I think your call of getting out of the Joe Mixon business isn't a terrible idea. I believe he signed a 3-year deal with Houston, so next year would kind of be a contract year. Getting a little older, if he can't stay on the field, that's going to be concerning. I have Travis Etienne at 31. I had Bigsby at 34. I think they're going to be closely bunched together, kind of leading this backfield. I have Blyshel Tootin kind of a little bit lower in the 50s. I think he will contribute, but I still think it's going to be those 2 guys at least in this year. Then I have Isaiah Pacheco at 30. I still have mixed feelings about Pacheco, but he seems like he's back to running a little better. Still, though, he's kind of the first and second down guy. I think he's going to end up splitting time with Kareem Hunt, and I don't think they're going to have a very incredible or productive power running game. So I have him down here. I have TreVeyon Henderson at 29. I like his talent. I like him a lot for Dynasty, but I think for this year, still going to be sharing with Ramondre Stevenson. And also the Patriots do some weird things with running backs and rotations, especially with Josh McDaniels, who is back. I have Jerome Ford up at 28. I think he's going to lead Cleveland's backfield. I'm not as convinced that they have much of a presence for Quinshon Judkins. I think Sampson will mix in. I think there's a lot of questions still for that Cleveland backfield and their team in general. And then I have Brian Robinson Jr. at 27. I think he'll be the lead back. He has yet to go for more than 799 yards in a season. So I think he is kind of what he is a high-end running back 3. And then I have Caleb Johnson at 26. I agree with you. I think going to be kind of splitting with Warren back there, but he is probably the back I prefer both in Dynasty and in redraft on the cusp there. So we'll do the top 25 tomorrow, but in this group, who was your biggest riser?
In this group, I'm gonna go probably, I think Tyrone Tracy, just because I didn't, he wasn't on the radar last year with them being so hot and heavy for Devin Singletary and Tracy not really playing much running back at all 1 year in college. Another guy that I'm a lot higher on than last year is J.K. Dobbins. He was coming off an injury, signed a cheap contract. But Tyrone Tracy is probably the one I'm the highest on.
Yeah, Tracy did kind of come out of nowhere. I think that's probably a pretty good call. Who is your biggest faller in this group?
Easily Joe Mixon. It's not anything Joe did wrong. It's just that, history tells us that he's at an age where productivity, and it doesn't sort of ease its way down. It just drops off a cliff. And I feel like we're looking right at the cliff between the foot injury, the offensive line woes, the fact that he's never been a terribly efficient running back throughout his entire career. He could easily rush for 1,000 yards this year, 3.3 yards a carry. That's kind of the type of back he is. He's a big, powerful. He weighs 230 pounds. He's a big dude, but I just think that we're at the cliff and they're getting ready to push him.
Yep. I think Mixon was a faller for me, but I'm also going to go with Rachaad White because prior to this time last year, I don't think either of us expected Bucky Irving to explode the way he did, and White had been pretty productive in that role. And I think he still has some talent. He just isn't the best guy on the roster anymore. Who's your biggest question mark in this group?
Oh, this group is rife with question marks.
That's true.
So many of them are backups that you just they need something to happen in front of them to move up into the top 25. ETN could be an RB1 this year. We've seen him be up there before. Anything could happen. I think I'm putting a lot of faith in Ray Davis. Maybe it's because he's been on the show. Maybe it's because, he looked pretty good in spurts last year and he was productive. If James Cook comes back and, with a fire under his ass, he could make Davis redundant. Cam Scadaboo is another one. Him and Tyjae Spears, both dealing with injuries now. Scadaboo's a guy that they're looking, I think, to kind of take a role, but is he gonna? He's a very good pass catcher. His dad was a collegiate wide receiver, but very similar to Christian McCaffrey. And no, I'm not comparing them. You've got these tall, skinny dads that have these short, stocky running back kids. Scadaboo's kind of one of those kind of guys.
Yeah, I think. I think probably you're right. There are a lot of questions in here. I think my two biggest questions are guys who either have an injury or who are coming back off an injury, and that's Pacheco and Joe Mixon. Mixon was running back 16 last year, and if he's recovered and he starts week 1 or is a little slow week 1 but gets back into the groove by week 2, this could be way too low for him. Pacheco, going into last year, he was still just the 1 and 2 down kind of running back. Wasn't a big game, piece of the passing game, but still we thought he'd be in the running back 2 category. But when he came back from injury, he looked horrendous in the regular season and in the playoffs. And that's given me pause all off season. The rumors are that he looks better, but it's still hard for me to believe it a little bit. And I wonder too, how much of a long-term plan he is. He was a 7th round pick. He's going into the last year of his rookie deal. So it's probably my biggest question. Who is one guy outside the top 50 who you think could crack the top 50 if things break right?
I'm going to grab a couple guys, and one of them is on a rising team, couple backs in front of him, but a lot of the industry is high on him, and that's Bashal Tutin. He's 5'9", 200-pound plus, blazing speed, 4.3s. If he gets an opportunity, he's one of these guys you could see just grab a hold of a role and keep it for a couple years. The other one is a much maligned young guy. I think he's going into year 3 or 4. Spent a couple years in Dennis Allen's doghouse, but that's Kendre Miller. Miller has some physical ability. He's got good size. He's technically good at the job of running the ball. He's not like Rachaad White where he can't see the hole and he just runs into people's backs. He's not like, if you remember Jordan Howard, who could not catch a ball to save his life. Miller is a reasonably good pass receiver, but he gets banged up. They've got Alvin Kamara there, holding steady. Another guy who's getting old, but Miller he could step into that Mark Ingram role that was there with Sean Payton and be productive for fantasy and kind of hop his way up into the top 50 or maybe even the top 30. To me, he's never been able to put it together. But we're coming to the end of that rookie contract. And so often, we see these guys the last 18 months, 2 years of that rookie contract, they start to figure it out and they play through those things that used to put them on ice. And maybe we see a little of that from Miller.
Yeah, I think the one I'm going to go with is Blake Corum. He didn't do anything as a rookie, but, when he got opportunity that first game in preseason, rolled out 9 carries, went for 32 yards, 2 touchdowns, caught a pass on his one target. I think Kyren Williams is the guy there. They tend to use one back pretty predominantly, but if something was to happen to him, I think that Corum looks pretty good. And he's going into his second year with Sean McVay, and we know that no matter where you were drafted, it's really not until your second year that you start getting trusted to do a little bit more. That'll do it for us today. We are going to be looking at the top 25 running backs tomorrow. We have some similarities, some differences, so that'll be a little bit fun. But if people are just jonesing, missing Monday Night Football, which is still not back, what can they do to fill the rest of their evening?
They can do what we do. Go to your favorite podcast platform, hit that search bar, type in the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast, give us a subscribe. Couple times a week, we're going to pop right into your feed with our fantasy football merriment.
Well, that'll do it for us today. We'll be back tomorrow talking top 25 running backs. So until then, you have a wonderful night.